Questions of Doom.
Hello and welcome back to another
Questions of Doom.
In this series, as ever, I attempt to answer questions that you send my way using the archaeosoup@gmail.com email address, as displayed on the YouTube channel homepage, and as you'll also see at the end of this video. In answering these questions by video, it is my fond hope that the answer is not only useful to the person who's asked the question, but also anyone else out there who may be wondering the same thing. Now, today's question of doom, I have to say, this is one of those ones which I would not in a million years have thought needed answering, as it were. And that's not to say that the person who's asking the question is daft for asking it. It's more just that I think archaeologists take certain things for granted, and this is a very good question, actually, and it's one which I'm so glad that we have the opportunity to clarify. So, it goes like this. Hello, Mr. Soup. I am currently studying to be an archaeologist in the state of California, with the prospects of becoming an archaeologist for either the state or national park services. I have recently taken an interest in the studies that have been done into the possibility of Vikings being the first Europeans to come to America, long before Columbus. Do you think that these claims could be true or false? Austin in California. Well, Austin, you ask an interesting question, and I'm going to be charitable and say that actually you're asking a very valid question specifically, but more generally there's actually a really clear answer to this question. So I suppose, generally speaking, the Americas, that is America, Canada, sort of North America, that whole area, were in fact discovered for the first time by Europeans, obviously not counting native people, but Europeans, by probably the Vikings. And we even know which Viking in particular it was. A chap called Leif or Leifur Eriksson, born in Iceland in 970 AD, or sorry, AD 970, and died in Greenland in AD 1020. So he only lived, what, 50 years, and discovered a whole continent, or certainly expanded his culture's understanding of the world at least. Now, he was actually the son of Eric the Red, who was the founder himself of a chunk of land, and that was Greenland. And he famously named Greenland Greenland, despite it not being really all that green, in order to encourage people to come and settle on this new chunk of land. Once they were there, winter was setting in, and frankly you had to hunker down and start living there. So it was a bit of a trick to get people to come and live in an otherwise uninviting area. So yeah, so it ran in the family, this sort of discovery and naming of things. Now, Leifur and his crew travelled from Greenland to Norway in the year 999. According to two particular sagas, the saga of the Greenlanders and also the saga of Eric the Red, he is the person who discovered, generally speaking, the North American sort of continent, as it were. Now, these two sagas were written around the year 1200 AD, so a couple of hundred years later, but nonetheless they're believed to be historically reliable and fairly decent records of a real event. There are also actually two other accounts which are more historical as opposed to in the stories, in the sagas, and these come from the work of Adam Bremen in 1075 and also the Book of the Icelanders, compiled around 1122 by Ari the Wise. So in various places, Leif or Leifur is the man who's named, who's credited with this discovery, but again the exact circumstances are a little bit sort of around the edges, a little bit fuzzy. So, according to the saga of Eric the Red, Leif saw Vinland for the first time after being blown off course. He was trying to visit his father in Greenland, got blown off course, and apparently saw this land mass to the west, which was not expected. Obviously the Vikings were excellent seafarers, and when he saw it he thought, "Ooh, what's that?" and then went and had a look. Now, that said though, according to the Greenlanders saga, it was actually after being told of land to the west that Leif went there. Apparently there's an explorer called Bjarni Heyolfsson, who actually claimed to have seen this land west of Greenland. Didn't make land, but did pick up two shipwrecked individuals, and then came back to Greenland, sold his ship to Leif, or Leifr, and then Leifr and his crew went in search of this new mass of land. So technically, potentially, these two unnamed shipwrecked souls are actually the first Europeans to have set foot in North America. But again, I think Leif would have something to say about that. Now, supposedly Leif followed Bjarni's route in reverse. He essentially tracked back, according to Bjarni's story, which way to go to get to this landmass. First of all, he landed on a rocky and desolate place, which he named Helundland, flat rock land, possibly Baffin Island. Then he carried on going and he landed in a forested place, according to the saga, which he named Markland, which I appreciate, my name being Mark. Forest land, or which could possibly actually have been Labrador. After 2 more days at sea, he finally came to a wonderful place filled with potential salmon and famously grapes. And this place came to be known as Vinland. Apparently, one of the members of Leifr's crew, a guy called Turkar, who Leifr himself describes as a foster father, so very close to Leifr as an individual, came and found that there were grapes, and he made wine, and so it became Vinland, the land of wine, the land of wine grapes, I suppose. And there they built a settlement, again according to these stories. Now the settlement was called Leif's Búðir, or Búðir, sorry, Leif's Búðir, and that means Leif's booths, or Leif's huts and houses, and potentially this is the site which has been archaeologically discovered and is now called Lance or Meadows. Now, after spending some time in Vinland, Leifr returned to Greenland with stories of this place to the west, and people started to apparently want to go there themselves. He actually became known as Leifr the Lucky because he travelled into the unknown, made landfall, settled, came back with honour, with some grand story, and he wasn't eaten by monsters or blown to pieces by the wind and the rain. You know, the ship survived, so he was Leifr the Lucky. Now, since the 1960s, really, people have been trying to take the stories from the sagas, which for a long time were seen as simply stories. For example, mentioning things like sunstones. Well, there actually are, it's been found, there actually are stones which can help you to polarize the light and to find the light even on a foggy day from the sun to keep you on course. So things like this, they started to sort of research them and come up with potential theories as to what on earth these sagas were talking about. And it seems that, as I say, that archaeologically this Norse settlement in the Lancer Meadows area, technically in Canada, is quite possibly the place where these Vikings settled. They probably settled further north and also further south, and maybe even further inland. And all of this stuff really comes back to, I suppose, what I was talking about when we first examined your question, Austin. When you say, did the Vikings discover America? Possibly not. Possibly they only discovered Canada, but obviously we're splitting hairs. They certainly came to the Americas, and as I say, that settlement, archaeologically shown to be a Viking settlement, is proof of this. And it's one of those things where Well, again, I just sort of take this for granted. I love the Vikings, I love the Saxons, I love that whole post-Roman world and the beginnings of Northern Europe as we understand it today. And I just totally take it for granted, and I would never have thought to ask this question myself. So thank you so much, Austin, for actually putting this question out there, because otherwise I'd have just gone along sort of blithely assuming, well, everyone knows that, but clearly everyone doesn't. And so thank you so much, and hopefully some other people out there will go, oh, right, okay, fair enough, so there is truth to that story. So again, there's no such thing as a bad question. A wonderful, wonderful thing that you brought to my attention there. But yeah, in short, the Vikings did find North America. Whether it was Leifr or Bjarni or the two shipwrecked guys who actually first set foot on it, probably not Bjarni according to the records. That's probably a little bit up for grabs. But what we do know, of course, is that actually they weren't the first human beings to go to that part of the world. There was a thriving native population who in other parts of the Northern Islands were referred to as the Skraelings by the Vikings, these other people. Ironically enough, actually thought of as savage by the Vikings, and history would later come to call the Vikings savages. Isn't that? I find that really rather pleasing. Everyone's always savage, apparently, not yourself. So once again, thank you so much for asking the question. If you have any thoughts or comments, guys, please do comment below. I look forward to reading them. And well, again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this, Austin. Thank you. As ever, until next time, do take care. Bye bye.